Hey everyone. Hoping everyone is good. Hoping everyone is well. It's a new day. I hope that you are in good spirits. I hope your ears are receptive to hear. And I hope that you are functionally being well. As stated, this will be a new season. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background of this season coming and the introductory episode for season 3. This will be a more personable season where I will be talking about some things that have occurred in my life, and more notably the reason why I began this journey that surfaced for me in my adulthood. And I want to say this, that for many people, a lot of us don't know that we are harboring a lot of our traumas until we get to adulthood, and it shows up in our relationships with people, significant others, and just, sitting still for a while and realizing that it's elements of us that are a little bit, I wouldn't say messed up, but needs a little bit of fixing. And, so this season is very personal. So I'm sharing some very personal moments of my life and what I've learned in this journey as well, in healing, and just also being, just honest with myself, is that many times our testimony and sharing what we have gone through helps others. You just don't know what others are going through until you talk about what it is that you went through, how you got out of it, and how you were just able to live with the freedom and liberty of knowing that you faced yourself. So for today's episode, it is called A Fatherless Child. And I want to preface this with saying this. I did have my father for 10 years, and it was a very impressionable time in my life, and I am thankful that God allowed those 10 years of having him. But for the latter 30 years, I have not had a father, and it has been a great impact on my life and the way I looked at relationships, the way I looked at people, and especially my connections with men, to be honest. So one thing about my father that I really loved was that, number one, he was a very, very quiet man. He didn't say much. My dad reminded me of a person who just lived in his own little head, in his own little piece. He was so good at drawing. The way in which he drew was almost as if he made it so realistic. He was very talented in drawing and painting, and he was musically inclined. He played the guitar. He had every record, I feel like, from like the 70s and the 80s. My dad had a collection that was just unheard of. Matter of fact, I have some of his records. Like, he loved music. One of the memories that I hold in my head anytime that I think about it that makes me smile is that my dad and I loved Soul Train. And Soul Train would come on about 11 or 12, and we would intently watch Soul Train from the beginning to end. And if it was a song that we both like, he would dance with me. And so we had a room in our house that we called the big room, and that was mainly where we would watch it because we had room, to move around, and we would dance to these songs. And it was something about seeing my dad smile and just being in a moment. He could move, y'all. He could step. And me mimicking and trying to do the moves, it was like, when I think about it, it's nothing but joy. And I also say this, my dad was very, very patient and very just kind in his ways. Now, my dad was slow to pop me or whoop me or spank me, however your terminology is. I remember three spankings or whoopings in my lifetime, but I'll tell you about these 3 that I loved that my dad did. whenever it got to the point where he had to like just pop me to, make my senses come back into, he always explained afterwards why he did what he did. And one of the things I loved about him as well was when he spanked me or when he popped me, he allowed me to sit in my tears. And most of the time I was being dramatic anyway. I was screaming to the top of my lungs as if, he was beating me with a brick. But it was more so because my feelings was hurt because my dad just never really spanked me. And so he would allow me to cry, and I would cry for a long time, and he would walk off. And when he knew that I was done, he would come, in the room, and he would say, now, you know why I did what I did, and he would say it in such a soft and loving manner that, even if I was mad at him because he popped me, I couldn't be mad. And I knew it was my fault. Because sometimes, I pushed the envelope. I pushed the buttons with my dad just to see how far I could take it. And I mean, it didn't make sense, but I was a child. And so when I pushed him too far and he spanked my little butt, I got myself together. But he always explained why he did it. And he would always give me a hug and tell me that he loved me. And when I lost him, I lost so much of me. And what I experienced after that loss is that those 10 years, now one thing again my dad did was he was wise beyond his years. And many times when we were together, my dad would like talk about politics. He would talk about life. Like he would talk about stuff that I, in this age range of like 6 to 10, I don't know that an adult would talk to a child that way, but he did. And in my own little way, I felt like he was just trying to get so much out in that time span because he knew he wasn't going to live long. And he had told so many people that he knew that he didn't feel like he was going to live a long time, and he didn't. He died at 38. But he made sure that he talked to me about everything. And that's one of the things that I take in because I needed it so much when I was a teenager and also an adult. And in the aftermath of all of that, I would cling on to the words that my dad would speak to me on different occasions. And I yearned for the moments in which he could tell me about boys or tell me about people or just correct me in my wrongs or when I had a question about certain things. And that was another thing as well. Like, I thought my dad was a walking encyclopedia. I could literally come to him and ask him about anything and he had the answers to it. Mathematically, he was a genius. It was so many things that I missed about him and I longed for. I remember one of the last conversations that we had was he was telling me about boys, and I was 10 at the time, and he was just saying, when we get older, boys are going to be different. And because a lot of the kids in the neighborhood were boys, and I was a tomboy growing up, so you couldn't tell me that I couldn't run with the boys, I couldn't play football. And he acknowledged that, like, he didn't have a problem with it at all. But it was one of those things where he wanted to have that conversation about how boys show up and this, that, and the other. And so I remember that conversation. And then, of course, life was cut off. And I didn't get to have those needed conversations with a dad about boys and about just expectations when it came to relationships and men. I felt in many moments that I lost my direction because the dynamic from which I knew as a family dynamic had greatly shifted. My mother was very consumed with her anger and her grief. And as I look back at it, my dad was definitely the balance in her life. He just had a way of reeling her back to reality and soothing the anger that she felt in her heart many times when she would come home from work. And his absence brought more of what he sheltered me from. And so that loss of not having my father made me aware of what life was going to be like being under my mother. I felt lonely. I had less fulfillment in my life. Many of the activities that I did in my life was closely related to my dad. I wanted to learn music, so he would play his guitar while I played the piano. And so the urge to even want to play piano didn't serve me because I didn't have my father on the other side of me. Music, now I would listen to his records and just reminisce on the songs that we would dance to or sing to. I kept his memory alive in that sense, but it wasn't the same. And I also couldn't go to my mother about things the way that I knew that I could about, with my dad. My dad was pretty much like an open vessel. Anything that you wanted to talk about, he was receptive, and he had a very non-judgmental spirit. He listened intently, and then if you needed, advice on something, he would offer and tell you. So not having that was very hard for me. Going into my teenage years, I got very jealous of, girls that I saw with their dads, and especially the ones that were very active in their lives, because my dad was that dad. I ran track in high school, and, one of the biggest things that I remember was him pushing me to run track. Again, I was in a neighborhood of boys, and I'll never forget, I even smile thinking about this now. We were in the neighborhood and we used the road right in front of my house to run. And I kept telling my dad, I was like, I can beat so-and-so and so. We ran this race and I beat him. And these were boys, y'all. And so he said, okay. He said, the next time that y'all get ready to race, you come and tell me. And so he was in the backyard that particular day. And I told him, I said, we finna get ready to race. And I said, can you stand at the end and say, ready, set, go. And so he came out there and he was at the end of the road and he had his hand stretched out, and he was like, on your mark, get set, go. And y'all, I tore out. I tore out like something was behind me, and I was running and like my dad's face lit up, and I, hit his hand, you know how you do, to say, you first, you won. And my dad was like, Lisa, you really can run. And he got so excited. And so after that, it was like him, just realizing that, I had an athletic component to me, and he would always ask me, you gonna run track when you get in school, and exercise and stretch your legs and run, make sure you get in your speed. And he was so into the fact that he saw his daughter beat a whole bunch of boys. And when he died, the year after, I went into track and field, and I remember crossing the finish line. I had won second place in regions, going to state, and I cried at the finish line. Ooh, let me get myself together. I'm getting kind of choked up. I cried at the finish line because my dad was not at the end. And I needed him there. So those were some of those moments where, for me, I missed out on just the sheer excitement and the gratitude that my dad showed to me on an everyday basis on something very small. And then I remember my first relationship. We're kids or we're young, not so mature. And, a boy broke my heart. And I couldn't cry in front of my mama because she wasn't with all that tear stuff. But I cried not long for my dad because I needed to just tell him that this boy liked this girl over me, and he told me that I was too tomboyish, and he went down the whole list. And I just remember just wanting and yearning for my dad's hug, and I didn't get it. And then going into my serious relationship and having my son, and being heartbroken that things didn't work out with my oldest son's dad. We were in college. We were young. What were we doing? And But the beautiful thing about this, in which I know that my dad was there, is that my son was supposed to been born a week prior to me having him. And my mom kept telling me, I really feel like your son is going to be born on July 17th. My dad had died on July 17th. And so as the days were going, I kept telling the doctor, like, I want him out now. It was the heat, the hottest of the summer. And y'all, we in Georgia. So our summers get hot. And I was miserable carrying my son. And I remember going to the doctor on July 17th. And the lady, she told me, she said, if you see, a bloody, spot, that means that the baby is coming, or a pink spot. And I woke up that morning and I had that pink spot. And I had a doctor's appointment that morning. And she said, yep, you're going to have the baby today. And my mother was elated because she had been telling me the whole time, you're going to have your son on the same day that your daddy died. And that was for me just an affirmation or affirmation that my dad was there with me at that moment. And so I did have my son July 17th. And then, as life would have it, 2020, I lost my mother on July 17th. And, my mom and my dad are together. But I say that to say that my dad's love was abundant. I didn't get to have the opportunity to have my dad walk me down the aisle. And I remember that one of the reasons why I didn't want to have a wedding was because I wasn't going to have my dad walk me down the aisle. I told my husband, I just want to go to the courthouse. Let's just do it at the courthouse. I really wasn't into, at that time, wearing dresses and being dressed up. That never really was my thing. But it was more so because I was not going to have my dad. And like every, young woman, they think of that moment, being alongside their dad and having that gracious moment of their fathers giving them away. And that moment was stolen away from me. So I thought in my head, and we didn't have a wedding. We just went to the courthouse. I said all that to say that a lot of things that happened in my life, it was about my dad, not having the opportunities and just experiencing things because my dad wasn't there, and I was so close to him. But I always remembered this. I said, the person that I want to be tied to has to be like my dad. I made mistakes in many situationships where I lost a part of myself. I don't know if it was that many times I had given up on myself and not seeing myself for who I was, or that I didn't value myself. But I do know that if I would have had my dad around, in moments where I felt low, I could have went and gone to my dad and he wouldn't have judged me. He would have redirected me to where I needed to go from a man's point of view. And I think many times as women, when our dads are, absent, we tend to just take on so much by ourselves. Something about having a man present is like a honor of protection, where his baby will never ever have to hurt again. And there's something about being face to face, a man or a boy being face to face with your dad, where they know, I don't play about that one. And so my dad was definitely one of those before he passed away. And that is something that I would never, ever get back. Not having my father really made me think long and hard about how I wanted my life to look like. And I recognized as well that when I got married and my husband and I were together for years, I wanted my husband to show up like my dad did to my mother, because this was the example in which I seen with my parents. And I often got frustrated because we were young, and I thought that my husband should have known, like, this is how a dad is supposed to be. This is how a husband is supposed to be. But I didn't take into account that my husband was a fatherless child, and he was raised by a single parent, and therefore I was putting all of my expectations off on my husband. And with having 3 boys as well, I felt like I wanted to raise my children the way that my dad has showed up for me, with a slow to anger approach, and not using physical punishment as a way of punishment to let them know that they messed up. I wanted to be slow in ensuring that I was explaining why it was that I was punishing them the way that I was, with just talk. In my adulthood, I really struggled with the way in which I care for people. I don't know if it was that I used my father's absence as a way not to love, but I will say that it impacted me greatly. After my father died, I really went into a sense of shock, where I really thought that I was going to die every single day after that. And that's really no lie. I would wake up in the middle of the night and check to make sure I was alive. It even transpired into, when I got married and watching my husband sleep at night. Like, I know it sounds like crazy creepy, but this was like the emotional toll that I was going through, because I was scared that I was going to lose my husband at a young age. And even little things that my husband would do, like if he snored, my dad used to snore, which was indicative of heart disease in his, in his health. But when my husband began to snore, I would wake him up in the middle of the night and get scared that he had a heart issue. And I would watch my husband at night. I would watch my kids at night. I would literally get up in the middle of the night 2 and 3 times at night and check on all 3 of my children and watch their chest rise up and down to ensure that they were still alive. The way that death had a hold on me, and the way of fear of feeling that I was going to be a widow, absolutely scared me crazy. I also realized that not having a father made me more open to making decisions that were rash before marriage and in my marriage. There was a sense of not feeling as if I was complete, because again, my father was everything to me. And even though years had passed, everything that my father meant to me, I needed back. And in my later years after he passed away, the unavailableness that my mother gave was a deep hole that could not be filled. My mother was sinking in her depression and acting in ways that were just not what she needed, and honestly not what I needed as a mother. And so she was not emotionally tied to me. She never talked to me about things. And she was, she didn't have emotion, to be honest with you. So that yearning for my father just made it harder for me to process emotions and build relationships with people, because I didn't want to get close to people in the sense that I was going to lose them. What I learned now in my adulthood is that, sometimes we think that we are by ourselves and that people don't understand. And I think I understood this more after I lost my mother in 2020 and coming to terms with death and how death really is and how it appears and just how it is in life, period. That this is the evolution and the circle of life, and that it will happen to all of us. I realized that for me, my way of, being okay with it was that the years that I spent with my father molded me in ways that made me look at the way in which he treated me. He treated my mother, and he treated other people. It's like the life that I want to live ongoing from now until the day, I rest my eyes. His grace, his love, his essence, his pure energy as a person was something that I felt privileged to know. And it would have been great to have him in these years of my life, to see 3 grandsons that he has, and plus, my brother's son. So that's 4 grandsons, that he would have loved and taught so many things. That would have been great. It would have been great to been walk down the aisle. It would have been great to call him on the phone and cry about the things that I was experiencing and I was going through. But when I look at it now, it was just a way for me to build myself up. Even if I don't understand the way in which God makes things happen, I understand in the aftermath that my father showed me and taught me so much in the beginning. And that the fatherless child feeling that I had, it's very hard, but it's very real. And I sit with knowing that his spirit lives within me. I said that to say, in my situation where I was able to have a father and then no longer, in these present years, is that I appreciate where I am and how much growth I have gotten from just acknowledging that life happens. I'm going to always wish for things that I didn't get to experience. But I'm more grateful that I did get 10 years. While I understand with talking to many friends that they didn't even have a relationship with their father. And there is a form of forgiveness that I was angry at God for a while as well, because everything was going so good. And my nuclear family, my mom, my dad, my brother, myself, we were happy, we were stable, and then things began to crumble after he died. I just want to tell you this. If you are a woman, a man who doesn't have your father in your life, and didn't have the presence of your father at all in your life, I want to tell you that I understand, but I don't understand to the gravity, so I will say that. There will always be moments of feeling as if you are all alone, feeling that no one will understand the way in which you show up sometimes, or the things that you long for, because they are not experiencing your experience. But I do know that things happen for reasons beyond what we can comprehend. And I just want to tell you that me sharing this story and this love that I had for my father means that I accept what happened and how things happened. And I'm okay with the regrets that I formulated in my mind. And I'm okay sitting here today. Sometimes we want things that we just aren't able to get, and that's okay. That's, naturally a part of human nature. But we also have to be appreciative in the moments in which we are living right now, and understanding that things are just set up the way that they are for the time being. If you have a father in your life, be thankful, be gracious, be honorable in that moment, and loving that person. If it is a situation where you and that father don't see eye to eye, and there is no form of reconciliation in the future, I definitely understand. Love as you may and love as you can. Love from a distance and love with all of your heart. Because once that person is gone, there is nothing that you can say out of your mouth that they can hear as standing next to you or on the receiving end. Spiritually, I hope that maybe they understand the words that we speak when we are talking. But as far as a physical face-to-face or audibly hearing through the phone, you won't be able to get that opportunity. Life is life. We will all come to an end. We will see our parents perish and die, They will go back to the earth, and life will go on. As harsh as it sounds, life will go on. I wanted to share that story with you because I loved my daddy. My daddy was my all and all. And I had difficulties in so many aspects of my life. But I reconciled with just knowing that things happen the way they do beyond my knowing. And I'm okay with that. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for just, being a listening ear as well. I am elated that we have so many people who are tapping into the podcast. I want to give a shout out as well. I didn't do it in the beginning, but I want to do it now. And the first is Love Jill 37. She says, great podcast. And I'll read just a little bit of what she said. I'm new here. I've listened to several episodes now, and it's always good to hear someone who shares similar ideals and awareness of energy around them. Love Jill 37. I thank you for that. Trainer G53. The podcast is a blessing. Loving the podcast. I discovered you on TikTok and have been following you ever since on Instagram. I'm now listening to your podcast. Thank you. Battered Woman. I really want to share this because this one touched my heart. Matter of fact, I really had a tear. She said, hi, my name is Janae. I want to be the one to say, I listened to you and it really helped me out of my marriage. I was being physically and emotionally attached and abused by my husband that I had been with for February 9th, was 16 years together, and April have been 8 years of being married, and it was just getting worse, and I would have been dead if I had not started listening to you. So I would love to say thank you so much. I became emotional about that because there have been podcasts that I've listened to that have really hit me close and that have changed the trajectory of my life in the way that I have thought. And so I thought that message was so raw and so real. And I am thankful for you, Janae, for that message. Thank you so much for listening in. Mom Work 30. She said, I'm Desi and I'm so happy that I found you on TikTok, and this episode to me was so deep because now I know I've been holding myself back. And the last one, Miss Jerry Marie, I hope I didn't butcher that. She said, I love the advice, guidance, and positivity Lisa Marie gives. A friend sent me one of her TikToks and I have been hooked on her energy ever since. Hit that play button. You won't be disappointed. I want to thank you guys for always coming in with the reviews and the ratings. I am grateful for your honesty, and I am also grateful for those who have emailed me and given me episode, things that you would like to hear, and also to podcasters who have reached out. I am excited about doing some podcastings with other people. I'm grateful. I'm glad you are here. I'm glad you're listening. I'm not going to prolong this. Thank you so much for being here, and I am out. See you later.